everybody, I'm Henry Kaiser, and welcome to 5 Hats, where I bring you into my process developing a video game as a producer, designer, engineer, artist, and journalist. When I ran Yahoo's VR content operation, this producer hat needed to manage a dozen simultaneous productions with no downtime. But developing a game, at least without funding milestones, isn't relentless. Breaks for job searching and freelancing means you can't strictly follow nominal development best practices. So how do you prioritize production and use breaks in development to your advantage? At this point in the series, I've said it a lot. Gameplay is priority 1, but what does that mean? You can't just step 1, design the whole game, step 2, engineer the whole game, and then step 3, add art. So how do you actually step through production? Short answer, define the core, develop the core, expand and polish. Let's start at day 1. Whether it's a commercial project or a 48-hour game jam, make a game design document and write down the core loop and mechanics. We'll go more into loops in next week's video. But besides the loop, in the first phase of your design doc, write down a vision for an early level and for an advanced level. For anyone who saw my Yahoo XR producer course, use the 5 layers: environment, object, subject, sound, and sky as categories to list art assets you need for those levels. If you have a second team member who's focused on art, they can start there. Even if things are changing, concept art and clips contribute to so many things, from design to marketing. If you don't have someone art focused, don't go grabbing stuff just yet. Simply record your planned art needs. Finally, in that day 1 design doc, add anything else you really like inspiration or design pillars, but don't get stuck micro-planning because you'll be revisiting everything as you work through making it. So, design doc in hand, get an engine, and start prioritizing production. What's the first thing to make? Focus on mechanical frequency. What happens the most often to the least often? If something, no matter how exciting, happens every hour of gameplay, that's low priority to develop. If something happens every second of gameplay, you need that in the game immediately. There's a reason every game development course starts with character movement. It's the first thing most players do. In my game, every second characters are moving, even when they're talking. So yeah, it was top priority for that to feel good first. Now, every few seconds, players are taking a photo or doing an interview. Primary mechanics of the gameplay. But to make those primary mechanics work, they are photographing combat and interviewing AI. So combat and AI are supportive needs. Only scope as much supportive development as necessary to polish the primary mechanics. Then stop that supportive development until after the core loop is finished. Finally, closing my core loop, only once per level does the journalist player select an assignment and write an article. Even though they're unique, important, and the start and finish of every level's loop, their development isn't a priority until the core loop is almost complete. Now, I can hear you asking, when do we prioritize art? I can't express enough how useful it is to not rush process. If you can stand up basic functionality with capsules or default engine characters, stuff like movement, basic AI, actions, level layout, user interface, if you can see it in your head, you're reducing the amount of double work you'll encounter. In the time a piece of art is absent from your game, your imagination is iterating far better than what you'd do if you filled that gap in a hurry, only to need changing it again and again. Now, obviously, if you can't envision something without seeing it, fill in only the art necessary for the task at hand. And do it quickly, less than a day, so it stays placeholder in your psyche. Don't worry about filling out a scene with art assets until you're prepping for the first playtest. Now, this isn't going to be a long wait because you should be playtesting pretty quickly. Don't wait for a quote-unquote first playable demo where all the systems are in place. Instead, identify trustworthy playtesters from your target audience who can run through new mechanics as soon as they're even remotely working so that you can observe and discuss. Scope your first playtest with 3 to 6 people within the first month of development. Then playtest each time you have a core mechanic integrated. Test, design, develop, then test again, design, develop some more. Do that until your game's core loop is working. Even if there's no meat on those bones, you just want that early level and that advanced level from your design document to feel the way you want the game to feel. After that, once you're playtesting a wider diversity of stages and circumstances, that's when art starts to gain priority. Finally, let's talk about the advantage of breaks. Obviously, no one's goal is to spend an entire decade working on a single game. But if you don't have the resources to do it full time, and you need breaks in development because you're working or job hunting, hi there. There are 3 obvious advantages. First, iterative design. Actual iteration takes time. I knew for a journalism game, the interview mechanic needed to be legitimately fun. But the design I was originally racing towards was a basic dialogue tree with some generative AI. and that early design was feeling at odds with the intended game. Thankfully, 6 weeks suddenly got diverted to paid projects, so instead of 8 hours per day racing through Trello tasks, I had weeks of just shower thoughts and subway sketches to reimagine the designs that didn't work. I reflected and remixed more than 50 iterations before landing on the interview rhythm game that my players currently find far more engaging. Speaking of which, breaks give you time to collect more playtests and collect nuanced insight. Even if you're not developing the game in between tests because you're on time off, you can Groundhog Day your interviews, trying different questions between testers to prod deeper insights about your game and players.
Is this some kind of trick?
Well, maybe the real God uses tricks. Maybe he's not omnipotent, he's just been around so long, he knows everything.
Finally, world building. If you want your world to feel unique and alive, your imagination needs time to explore that world. This is not waiting for inspiration. Give yourself small tasks to invent the cultural styles, zoologies, boundaries, historical events, and not just inciting actions, but the reasons behind the inciting actions that lead to your player's role in the world. Most great fictions take time to find themselves. Well, if you've got time, use it. The biggest risk when taking time off is losing momentum and forgetting how things work. So go into each break, refreshing documentation, your task lists, and commenting the code. Treat it as if you've got a change in personnel, as if you've got one employee retiring and a new one starting in a few weeks. Still, every workday, put in 15 minutes if you can. Trust me, you can spare it. Now, how do you prioritize your projects? And what are your shower tasks when something is on the back burner? Let me know in the comments. And if you have a specific project or role that you want to talk with me about, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. That's all for this episode of 5 Hats. On the next one, we'll be in the designer hat, scoping the loops of our players' thinking, from every 30 seconds to every 30 hours. See you then.